Welcome everybody to the next episode of Chiefs Focus First and 10. You are here with JP Caleb and we got Keaton on. What's up, guys?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good,
Good,
good.
everybody.
How you doing, man? Keaton just got back from Italy, bastard.
It was a great trip. Great
yeah,
trip.
yeah. I don't want to talk to you about it because I wanted to go, but
You didn't bring us any food.
Bring us
We're
nothing.
disappointed in you, Keaton.
Yeah,
Nothing.
I'm sure. I'm sure you guys would have rather just stayed home and talk
Oh,
Chiefs,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's been so lively lately with the Chiefs. It's been a not so interesting time other than a few little outside stuff outside of the Chiefs, other than, Dieter retiring and which we kind of somewhat assumed that was coming fairly quick, just given the fact of this roster and he hasn't really had any playtime prior. So, and his back injury didn't help him much. So I don't think I think it was just time for him to, he's got kids now and it was just time for him to retire. But I was
How
just,
would you how would you guys remember his time in Kansas City?
Well, he didn't play that much, but I mean, he was best friends with almost all the players. So
yeah.
I mean,
I feel like-
he was a personality, that's for sure. So
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I said this kind of earlier, but I feel like it's not. He didn't really get the opportunity per se, and I feel like last year would have been the opportunity for him to get some valuable snaps. But we end up seeing is like players like DeMarcus Robinson were taking his snaps, and I feel like when it came down to, I think Dieter would have probably done a little bit better. That's just
Yeah.
my personal opinion.
I
But
agree
we
with
don't
you.
know all the behind the scenes stuff. I feel like that would have been the year to try to see what he could do. If you're letting Darius Fountain play, letting these other guys, let's see what Dieter can do.
Yeah, and
So-
I agree with you. I think, they were marketing Robinson. They had been doing that for weeks, trying to find a team for him
Mhm.
through trade last year. And Dieter was Mahomes' best friend for sure. And he was there for Tyreek during his time of trouble. And, he was not, I don't know if he was the greatest player because we really never got to see him play. He was fast. He seemed like he
Mhm.
ran routes okay. I think he was more that personality in the locker room that just
Mhm.
gave everybody a lift, kind of like that Charkandrick West
Yeah.
style of guy, that Charkandrick always had a smile on his face, and when he walked on the field, everybody was happy to see him, and he always had everybody laughing. So that was
yeah, I could be wrong, but I think Mahomes and Dieter roomed together in minicamp his first year.
I
I
think
might be
so.
wrong on that,
Yeah, I
but
think you're right.
I believe that's true.
Yeah, they were really close. So and they're going to stay close. I mean, it just is what it is. But it was probably a good decision on his part. I mean, it's what 6 years in the league, and or 5 years? No, 4 years. 5 years in the
I think he
league.
said 5 on his
5 years.
story.
Yeah, 5 years in the league. And, I mean, if you're not going to get the opportunity and now it's, past your kind of prime to a degree as a wide receiver, even though he's got fresh legs, that's for sure.
Mhm.
It may have just been, it may have been a multitude of things, the family and wanting to spend more time with his kids and knowing that I'm sure he did very well with his money that he did make and, probably doing okay. So what's the point? What's the point in sticking
Yeah, I
around?
think the Chiefs must have told him that he probably was not going to get a contract this year just because of the depth of wide receiver with
Mhm.
Justin Ross even being added to the mix. I think he was just kind of the odd man out in
Yeah.
this situation. In the last couple of years, he's been a fringe player, and I think he was just tired of constantly putting in the work, going through being a practice squad player, and then just never
Mhm.
getting to play.
Yeah.
While also taking a toll on his body. And guys that have played 5 years in the league, I don't care if you didn't play or not, they make pretty good money. So I'm sure he made enough money. And he mentioned on his story that he was maybe wanting to open up a business of some sort.
Yeah.
So that may be what his next goal in life is. And I hope wish him the best. And in other news, I saw that Brandon Marshall retired, or not Brandon Marshall. Flowers. It was Flowers that retired
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Brandon Flowers.
Brandon Flowers retired. Yeah. And there was another one that retired too. And I can't think of who it was, but I got brain fog right now. But
Was it a
there's
Chiefs
another.
player?
No. I can't think of who it was, but there's been 3 retirements that I've heard of in the last week. Dieter being one of them, Flowers, and then one other one. I forget-
Oh, that is center Alex Mack for the 49ers.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he retired. So I don't know. And then somebody signed a one day contract to turn around and retire. Can't
I
of
think
who.
they said that. I know who you're talking about. It's the quarterback. Fitzpatrick, he retired.
Yeah,
But he was maybe
I thought it
gonna
was a
he
running
was
back
gonna
too. Might have been a running back as well, and I can't remember now who it was.
Gore.
Gore. It might have been Gore that decided to do a 1-day contract and then retired
Yeah,
as a 49er.
he retired as a 49er.
Yeah, so there's been a few, but it's part of the game. I mean, he played a long time and played well up until the end. So
I think the crazy part of his career is he tore his ACL twice in college.
Yep.
And he still was able to put up lengthy career. I think he probably had one of the longest careers of any running back in the NFL in history. So
yeah, him, Adrian
cool for
Peterson,
him. He's a good player.
What do you guys think of this D Ford situation? What's your opinion on D Ford and everybody's saying that he should come back or not come back or whatever to the Chiefs at this point?
I kind of I just talked about this earlier before that we started the podcast, but he's a player that with the guys that are available right now, there's not a ton. You're looking at maybe is one of those players, but there's not a whole lot left. There's Jason Pierre-Paul, who's visiting the Ravens today, who's a good player that I thought the Chiefs may bring in for a visit or may not. But they're all kind of older guys, and D Ford's a guy who's a little younger. He still has, I think, some left in the tank. He's very injury prone, so that's something to watch for. But if you're able to get a guy like that on a veteran minimum deal and he wants to come back to the Chiefs, which that's still up for question if he wants to come back after everything. But if he wants to come back, I'd be more than happy to see him back in a Chiefs uniform, especially for depth.
Yeah. What do you think, Caleb?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I feel like he's not going to come back to Kansas City for the simple main reason that the fans probably don't want him back. I mean, the last moment we have of D Ford is all sides, and he was all sides and negated the interception that would have put the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And I feel like kind of from that whole situation, and everyone's irritated when they see that clip where he goes, "I was all sides," look at a confused face. I mean, it would be nice to have the depth, but I feel like they're going to go in a different direction. I feel like the Chiefs traded him for a reason. If you're bringing him in, I mean, he has back injuries. Back injuries are nothing to play with, especially in football. And since he has these back injuries, I don't think he can be able to help this team get to where they want to be. And because of that, it's going to cause them to put money in a position where they're going to waste on a player when they could have put that much another player like a Sue, or like what Keaton said, Jason Pierre-Paul, or there's many others that are out there.
Yeah.
So it kind of honestly just comes down to the money situation, but I just don't see the Chiefs, even if it's a veteran minimum, $750,000. I don't see that even happening.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way.
Question to that: if it's not him, then who do you think they're going to bring in? Because there's no way. I don't see there's any way that Vitrol's in a season with $14 million in cap space.
I like the Donkey Sue 1 year, $10 million. Just going and do it. I mean, he's going to bring some intensity. Put him next to Chris Jones. I was kind of thinking
the same thing.
I'm like, put him next to Chris Jones. Let's see what they can do. I mean, it will help primarily because we will have. I'm kind of a little worried about our edge situation, but I feel like if you add a guy like a Sue, and he can help disruption with Chris Jones, Frank Clark. If you guys have seen the videos, this man looks shredded. He looks like he lost a lot of fat.
He
looks like he's on a mission.
Yeah.
And we got other guys ready. I think we'll be fine from that standpoint. Now it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do, but moves can still be made. However, it will come down to if the Chiefs can get the right guys in for the right situations. And if they don't do that, I mean, we're going to be in a situation where they're going to be sack nation doesn't exist. I mean, they're basically pressure nation now because they don't get any sacks. And when they do get close to getting a sack, guys just end up running freely and nothing happens.
Well, I tell you, as far as D Ford's concerned, he didn't leave on the greatest of terms with the players as well. So it's not just the fans, it's the players. And I think a lot of them thought that he was milking it, and they were vocal about it to some degree. I know that for a fact, but I just don't see the reason. I mean, I can't see him coming back here, and I can't see Veach bringing him back, or Andy for that matter, with a what-if situation. Now, again, if he comes back on a league minimum, vet minimum, and it's a 1-year deal with an option to see how he does that may be a different story because then you can always use them in rotation for depth or something. But
I feel like we need a starter.
we do.
We need like because we don't know what Frank Clark's going to do, so we really need a starter.
Well, I'm going to predict something really quick about Frank Clark.
Okay.
I have this crazy. I've had this feeling for a while that he is going to have probably one of the best years of his career coming up this year.
All right, give us some numbers.
Well, I'll give you this before. I've talked to a few people that have said that he has worked out like none other. He's done everything to keep himself on the straight and narrow. He is putting all the time and the effort and the work in to be what he used to be. And he has got a new mindset. And with the new mindset brings motivation. And I think he has that. I would not be surprised if he had 10 or more sacks this year.
Okay.
I would not be surprised. I have a feeling he's going to put a lot of pressure on people, quarterbacks. I think he's going to be in the mix with everything. And my buddy told me he's been working a lot on technique. And that's a huge part of that position is technique. And they said he has been really putting the work in for that. So
okay.
So something interesting about what we were just talking about. I was looking up some free agents that are still left, and a name that I haven't really talked a lot about is Trey Flowers, who's only 29 years old, but he's a defensive end, and he played for Detroit last year, which obviously probably not the best situation. He joined one of his coaches that used to coach him up in, I believe it was the Patriots. I believe he played for the Patriots, and he joined Patricia's team in Detroit and struggled a little bit there. But I think him, Justin Houston is still available as an edge. Sheldon Richardson at defensive tackle is a very good option. And same with Dominican Suh. Larry Ojinobi, defensive tackle, played for the Bengals last year. He flashed a lot of playoff games last year. So there's a guy that shows up. So there's a lot of linemen left. These guys are going to sign somewhere. So, it might as well be with a team that is defensive lineman needy and that can offer them a starting position. So there's no way we're done because I'm gonna look at the exact number here in a second on over the cap, but the Chiefs have cap space to do stuff still. And I was a little confused on why maybe a move wasn't made earlier. I thought we maybe been saving it for a guy like Bradbury, who we thought that the Chiefs might get.
Well, that may have happened, but that just went the other direction. But yeah,
it did go the other direction. But now you're sitting here. Maybe that was the plan, and you have all this cap space now. What is the best option? I think it may be the best option. May be to double up on maybe some veteran defensive line talent because they do have $14 million in cap space, which ideally you could sign two guys off that list. You could probably sign Justin Houston plus a Sheldon Richardson, a Suh maybe, who's 35, but there's some better options out there. And you could still get away with having that $5 million that Veach likes to bring in during the season or to have during the season to make some moves. So
you think
there's some guys out there.
Do you think Veach will actually spend the money?
Well, I think he has.
I feel like in the past it's been kind of like, we really could have used a trade during the deadline, but it didn't happen.
Well, I don't think a lot of contending teams bring $14, $15 million in cap space into the season because if you're trying to win now and you're expecting, because we heard it in the press conferences. I don't know if you guys have watched it, but on the Chiefs app, I've been watching the press conferences. Some of the defensive coaches, Spags literally said that he expects there to be a learning curve, especially early on in the season with the younger defense coming in. I feel like if you're trying to combat that and prevent that from happening, the perfect thing to do is add some veteran defensive talent like a Trey Flowers, who probably would get somewhere between $8 to $12 million a year, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I think he would contribute. I think as a defensive end, he could be a rotational guy. Him and Dana. I think that would be some of the better rotational players in the league. So, if it's a defensive end, if it's a defensive tackle, I think you have to get at least one more starting player, whether it's defensive tackle or defensive end, to at least have some depth going into the season. Because even though we used a first rounder on Karlaftis, the talent at defensive line is still very thin.
It is, and as far as Justin Houston's concerned, I wouldn't put. I mean, I would give that about a 3% chance. It was a very harsh parting, and I just don't see that happening. I think if that would have been the case, there's going to have to be a lot of mending that goes on before he comes back.
I mean, he didn't play up to his contract.
No.
First and foremost.
He did post a picture of him in a Chiefs helmet before he signed with the Ravens.
I know.
Yeah, and I didn't get that, but I mean, maybe he was trolling. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time a player's done that.
He was trolling. I mean,
I think he was trolling.
Yeah, he was trolling. I mean, that's just something he was doing to probably just piss everybody off. But he was one of the greatest we had for a long time, and when he got that contract, he just kind of fell off, and it's sad to see that happen. But it was a bad parting, and I don't think that it would be very easy to get him back. He would want a tremendous amount of money to come back to play here, unless they mended their internal issues and they built that trust back between each other, and he just wanted to win a championship. He's probably kicking himself in the ass for doing what he did, because he could have won a championship with us.
I don't know, JP. I mean, I don't know if he really is, because I feel like he wanted the money. I mean, when you look at, he was getting what it was, $101 million deal, $51 million guaranteed. Yeah. I remember looking at that contract and I was like, man, that's a lot of money. We'll see what he can do. It just didn't work out, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm hoping for the best, but the player on the list that I would really want, that Keaton said earlier, would be Ndamukong Suh. You can put him anywhere, pair him next to Chris Jones. I think you're in a good spot. You won't have to worry about a lot of different things. If you have Chris Jones and Suh there, and add a healthy Frank Clark, and add it like a Mike Dan to come in every once in a while, I think this defensive line will be okay with just that move.
Was Suh at his age?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, if you watched the playoff loss against the Rams last year, he was their best defensive player in that game. I watched it, and I've watched it again, and he was the best defensive player by far, and he got a lot of praise for that game. So he still shows up. Whenever it matters the most, he still shows up. He may be 35, but if it's a 1-year contract for, I don't know, I don't think I would give him $10 million, but if he wanted somewhere between 5 to 7, I would be willing to do that, just because of the fact that he is a veteran player who's had success in this league, who's had a long career, and has a lot of snaps, in the last couple of years. So he still is a serviceable starter. And I think he would be an automatic upgrade
to the younger guys too. I mean, he could teach.
Yeah, he would be an upgrade. I mean, who's going to start as a second defensive tackle spot? I mean, you got guys that are very unproven. The guy who signed from the Colts, who's more of a rotational piece. Yeah. It's just a lot of question marks there. But if you're able to get him or Sheldon Richardson, I think you're looking at this a little bit differently. And I know that's kind of what we said last year going into the season. I forgot who was it that just signed a deal with the Packers that we had last season that we thought was going to do really big things with us.
Man, his name.
Defensive tackle.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of his name right now.
We got from the Seahawks.
Yeah.
That tells you all you need.
Jaron Reed.
Yeah, Jaron
Reed. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit different than that, because I think Jaron Reed was expected to, because he was younger. Like, he should have had a better season last year than he did. And he showed up. He played a little bit better towards the end of the year, but I think a veteran like Suh would come in and make an impact immediately, more so than some of these younger guys.
Yeah, I think he would be a good as far as teaching the younger guys how to play and giving them techniques and things of that nature, and also being a viable starter. As long as he stays healthy, I mean, I wouldn't have any complaints. I wouldn't go more than $7 million on a 1-year deal, but
for who?
For Suh.
I feel like, honestly, in order for him not to go to rival, you need to give him 10. He could very well end up like a team like the Bills, and then you got to deal with Von Miller and him, true. And then other guys. That. So it's kind of like you kind of got to spend the money, and we'll see. I'm gonna be ultimately disappointed if he does not spend this $14 million by the midpoint of the season. If he does not spend the money, it's gonna be,
I think that's my question mark. Is he going to? Does he like any of these guys well enough to bring them in for probably a little bit of an overpay? Because
it comes down to, do they want to win a Super Bowl, or do they want to have the same thing happen last time? Because Pressure Nation didn't do anything for them besides make the team look really bad.
Yeah.
That's facts. Well, I don't know. I would rather pay Trey Flowers more than I would rather pay Sue.
Yeah.
That's just me. But I don't know
Mhm.
if either of them would start. I think Sue would start. I don't think Trey Flowers would start, but I feel like we need more depth on defensive end more than we do at tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. And I know Veach likes to carry some money through the season. Usually hangs on to about $5 to $6 million during the season. So whoever he does sign, it's going to probably be a $8 to $9 million guy. And hopefully it's somebody that'll fit in within the scheme. And that's a big part of it. We preach this all the time. Is you could have 5 great guys out there, but if they don't fit within the system, you're wasting money and time, and you may not be in a viable position with or without them. So, or just as bad a position with them or without them, I should say.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of weird articles coming out because there's not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, somebody had an article out about. I just looked at it earlier, and I can't think. It was just a very strange, weird article about a certain player that the Chiefs should have picked up, which I didn't understand in any aspect. But it was. I wish I could remember who it was now. It was the same guy that wrote the Charlie Weiss crap. He wrote another article about a player that we should have signed, and it just it made zero sense. It was somebody that would have never fit in our scheme. I'll tell you another thing I've seen. This is getting old. Okay, the whole thing about Britt Veach causing the issues for the Chiefs last year during the beginning of the season or throughout the season has got to get squashed at some point. Same writer, same ignorance, but that is something that causes more animosity with fans and more doubt than anything else is when you put out crap. And that to me is just ridiculous. Okay. Could it have affected Andy and his decision making to some degree? Maybe. But Andy was also sick for 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So he had absolutely nothing to do with the play calls or the way the players were actually playing the game. There were so many other factors that were involved to bring up Britt Reed as the problem and the reason why the Chiefs struggled. I don't understand it. I don't get it when it's proven fact of all the other issues that this team, and the adversity they had to go through last year to throw it on somebody that's not here, that really had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on during the season. It wasn't an emotional thing. It didn't. I mean, if it affected anybody, it affected Andy. It didn't affect any of the players. So I don't know, man. It's weird.
And one thing I would kind of add to it, I mean, when you look as a whole, the team, they had, like you said, Andy was sick. You had them, they were losing a bunch. They were doing a new offensive scheme. So there was a factor being different issues. But one thing I kind of looking forward to this season, I'm wondering if the coaching staff can be more reactive very quickly instead of being more passive. We remember, JP, we were talking about the position battles we were seeing, where we're seeing guys were not given a chance, like DeAndre Baker was not going to play. Thornhill was not being able to play. Yeah. And I'm kind of wondering, all right, is Veach and this defensive coaching staff and Andy's overseer, are they going to actually make the right moves? And that's kind of something I've been looking at and like, well, if this team wants to make that next step, this is where it needs to be done.
Well, they've had those conversations last year, and I know at the end of the season, Veach had conversations with everybody, coaching-wise, about how things ended up and players that shouldn't have been on the field in the wrong position, especially on defense. And that, I think, is probably going to, this is going to be a make it or break it year for Spags. I'm just going to be honest with you.
It should be, because he's done some good stuff, but I don't know if you agree with me, Keaton, but his moves over the last couple seasons have been very questionable per se.
It just doesn't make sense. Like, to the average fan watching, you're seeing Thornhill being on the bench, one guy who's exceptionally athletic, and then you see Sorensen out there getting burnt on every play where that, Thornhill doesn't get burnt. It happens maybe once or twice. Sorensen got burnt almost every game.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen. And you ask every time the media asked, like, how come Thornhill's not playing? Like, there was no answers. No one could give us a definite answers as to why.
They were saying stuff. If I'm right, I think they were saying stuff for Sorensen, like, well, he's been here longer. He knows the scheme and knows the system. And I'm like, okay, that's great and all, but when you play bad in a game, your coach is supposed to take you out. And I will stand by this. The Chiefs ultimately wasted Armani Watts and Dorian Daniels' first contract.
Yeah.
You could have let Armani Watts play in Sorensen's position. I believe if Armani Watts would have got more playing time, he would not got beat like he did in the division round of the playoff game. I really think guys like Dorian O'Daniel could have been helpful against a scrambled quarterback like a Josh Allen in that game as well. But they didn't get the opportunity. And when they did get the opportunity specifically for Armani Watts, it didn't work out.
Well, as far as Thornhill and Baker are concerned, we've talked about this before, and we know it to be fact that it was all internal. And Baker was in the doghouse for pretty much the entire season, and Thornhill was in the doghouse for a while, and it was a stupid thing, and we knew it. We talked about it on the show that coach that started all of this would be gone at the end of the season, and he was, and he's now in Miami. But to me it was a dumb move on Spags' part to, regardless if you have an issue with someone because of another coach and you really don't see it yourself, I think you need to put your best players on the field if you want to win. And that's just that simple. I don't know why he allowed the depth chart and a coaching issue between two players get in the way of us succeeding, but he did. And that was part of the conversation that I know for a fact that was between Andy and the coaching staff, was that, there was a lot of issues besides just offensive internal issues. There were some defensive internal issues. We've talked about it numerous times, and it's all become true. We all know it to be true. It all came out well after the fact that we talked about it. In fact, one of them came out on ESPN, but the day after we talked about it on our show. But it's just, it was ego and old school mentality that kept players off the field that should have been on the field. And I think that was a huge mistake on Spags' part. And that's why I say I know this is a make or break it year for him, because if he doesn't improve his coaching style and get out of the depth chart mindset, he's going to be gone next year. It's that simple. I know that to be true.
Yeah, I think that is the right decision if that happens. If we go through another year like we did last year where there's players that we wonder why they're on the field and they end up having a bottom half of, scoring wise against their defense, their bottom half of the league, I think you need to see them gone, because I think it sends a message to the rest of the team that, well, hey, we're going to keep guys just because we like them, not because they're not performing. You know what I'm saying? Because if he's not performing, he should not be a coach. And something else that's kind of annoyed me about him is his inability to play younger players just because they may not know the system as well. And the reason that annoys me, because we could be a bottom team, like 32 out of 32 teams, we could be ranked last in defensive efficiency, and he would still refuse to put players in. Like, how is it going to get worse? Like, it's already your bottom half of the league. Why not try something new? Why not play some rookies, get them the playing time, get them an experience? And, these older guys are going to be gone anyway. Why not let these younger guys get some steps or get some reps and get some snaps to maybe, prevent some of these things from happening later in the season where, some of these older guys are just way too bad, like Sorensen. You see him coming off the field, and then Thornhill makes some mental errors in the Bills game. Well, maybe it's because he hadn't played half the year. So that's just my opinion of it.
Well, I have a question for you guys as well then. Do you think that ultimately falls on Reed? Is Reed at fault by letting this happen? Reed is the head coach. He's the overseer. Is this kind of his fault?
No. And the reason
you don't think so?
No. And this is the reason I say that. Everybody, because he's the head coach, doesn't mean that everything he says goes. It's in every defensive coordinator's contract and most offensive coordinators' contract that they have the ability to call the plays, put the players on the field that they want on the field. And no one, usually it's similar to how what's his name that went to the Giants? It was going to be our offensive coordinator.
Kafka.
Kafka. I mean,
Yeah,
he got full
man.
control. He got full control of the offense. He has the say in every part of the offense, whether it's good or bad. He has the say, and nobody can overshadow that. The head coach can't overshadow that. And it's
Well,
similar to the Eric Bieniemy situation. He was allowed a certain amount of calls on his own, and that's why there were certain times that you seen Andy calling every play, and then there was times that you saw Bieniemy calling plays, and we went downhill. Um, it's it's one of those things that you have to realize that every coach has, when you're up to that stature, every coach has their in their contract that they have the ability to do something. Spags has that ability. He has that ability to be able to say, okay, I want Sorensen here. I want this guy here. And I'm sure that's changed now, but it was in his contract, and it just is what it is. And if he was too ego, I guess if it's too egotistical or maybe too headstrong to take suggestions from someone else, then that's on him.
I
It's not
do
on
feel,
me.
however, JP, I don't mean to interrupt you. I do kind of disagree with that because I feel like if you're the head coach, you need to have your hand in certain aspects of the game. And if you're having issues, like, so I'm not, if you're having issues, you need to step in and be like, okay, the right players need to play. We know what we can get out of Juan Thornhill. We know we can get out of a Dirty Dan. We know we can get out of a Ben Neiman.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just, I feel like, I understand, like you're saying with the contracts, but I feel like the head coach should be able to oversee that and make some changes. Because if you don't make changes, the Chiefs will lost off those moves. I mean, they wouldn't even make the playoffs, to be honest.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
I
It's
agree with
possible.
I
I
agree
agree
with
with
that.
that. I was going to say that in another coaching's position, say it was Bill Belichick, probably the best coach in the world. You think he would stand for letting his defensive
Oh no,
coordinator
that
do
change
that?
would be made during the game.
Well,
Yeah.
That change would be made.
Here's the thing, though. When you look at a Bill Belichick, you're not going to see those style of contracts for an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator. Josh McDaniels never had that kind of pull. Uh, what's his name? They went to Detroit.
Patricia.
Patricia. He didn't have that kind of pull. There's certain, like, because you're looking at basically a coach slash GM, and there's a difference. There's certain teams that, and it sucks because Andy should have that say so, and he should have had that say so, but he didn't. I don't think that Josh McDaniels ever had it in his contract that he could change a play on Belichick. I don't think that Patricia did either. Belichick is a defensive minded coach anyway. And when it comes to that part of it, he's going to make those decisions. Andy's an offensive minded coach. He's going to make those decisions. Some coaches are lucky enough, especially if they're a coach slash GM, that they can get away with putting the contracts together and making it the way they want it. But for the most part, 98% of the coaches in the NFL have a certain amount of criteria in their contract that states they are allowed to do this, do that, do the other. And it's just kind of part of it. So
I just feel at a certain point, you got to step in
yeah,
and at least not make them, but let them know, like, hey, you need to figure something out because
Yeah.
this right here is not working.
well, and
And
that's
I know
the thing.
Andy, and I know Andy has a friend who's friends with a lot of these coaches, more specifically when it comes to Spags. But I feel like it comes to a point where your decisions ultimately affects everyone.
Yep.
If someone does something on the football field that they're not supposed to do, that the defense corner is allowing them to do, it's going to affect the offense. And if it's going to affect the offense, it's going to affect the special teams. And ultimately, it's going to affect the whole team.
Oh, I
and then
agree.
they could lose that game.
I agree with you. And
I
that's
mean, we
where
saw players like, Zay Anderson was getting a shot on special teams. The guy had back-to-back weeks, 2 costly penalties on
I
special
remember
teams.
that.
yeah.
Kick return was negated. We would have won that Bengals game if they got to give him that kick return. I fully believe that. And then the next week after, he runs it to the punter. So, I
Well,
mean,
you know
I
what's funny
understand.
about that too is that you say that and it kind of cracks me up because when Toe was doing his press conference and I think it was actually Harold, a friend of the show's, he and She's Focus, he asked the question, who's one of your shining stars on special teams right now? And he actually said Zane Anderson after that.
And
So,
I'm surprised by these
Yeah.
answers because it's like, okay, I understand. Like, you don't want to bash a player, But when you lose a game like that in those type of fashion, or you see these issues come about, I understand no one's perfect on a football field. There's too many extruding factors that are going to cause problems. But I feel like you got to have a stand somewhere and make sure the right players are playing. I mean, back-to-back weeks should be more than enough saying, okay, this should not happen again.
Well, and like I said, and I completely agree with you. And that's why, when Andy has those conversations and Brett Veach has those conversations with the positioning coaches or offensive defense coordinators after the end of like a season like we had last year, that's what changes in their contract. That's what changes in the abilities that they have. If they want to stick around, this is what's going to happen. That's why you see now Matt Nagy here as a quote unquote quarterbacks coach, assistant coach, things of that nature, because some people just don't want to change. And it's just part of it. And the crazy thing about this whole thing is that the last year Sutton was here, when we went on that, we were like dead last from week 1 to week, I think 5. And we talked about it on the show. The Chiefs brought in a couple of consultants to help the defense along. And they went from dead last to like 17th from week 5 to week 10. That consultant left. They went right back downhill again. That consultant, one of those consultants was Spags. He was not working that year, and he was one of those consultants that helped with the defense. So it's crazy to me to think that, he did so much good, but yet can do so much harm at the exact same time and honestly, it really makes you want to think that he's very egotistical. And he's very strong-willed. And when you tell him, he's the type of guy, to me, just from the outside looking in, if you tell him it's raining outside and it's pouring buckets, he'll say, no, there's not a cloud in the sky. It's just he just seems like one of those kind of guys. I don't know. I've heard different things from different people I know. Some are good, some are bad. That's not my, place to get into it. But the one mistake that he made last year was listening to Sam Madison. He should have never done that. That was a huge mistake on his part. And it ultimately cost us not only games, and a chance at a Super Bowl, but it made us look bad. And that's something that we shouldn't have done. But I think that's not going to be the case this year. I think that's going to be turned around. So anyway,
the guys from New York, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, he's got his own mindset, man. I mean, and he is a 4-time Super Bowl coach, 2-time winning Super Bowl coach. So there's a 3.
I think he's 3-time Super Bowl winning coach, has been to 4.
Been to 4. Yeah. So I mean, that's,
he knows his stuff. It's just you gotta move. You got to adjust.
You have to adjust.
You have to adjust.
Yeah, and you can't let your own mindset and your own internal feelings get in the way of the team's success. And I think that was a huge problem last year on both sides of the ball. And it definitely wasn't because of Andy. So it's just something that had to change, and they're making those changes, and they've done a phenomenal job, I think, as far as bringing in talent. And they got a couple of holes to fill on defense, but as far as offense is concerned, they're stacked. And most of the defense is stacked. It's really just a matter of filling a little bit on that defensive line and seeing what they can do from there. But I think they've done a phenomenal job this year. Veach was on a mission, and he hit it on every point. I mean, he really did. Other than, the D line, which I feel like he had a plan in place that didn't work out. And that's probably why we're not seeing what everybody wants to see right this minute. But I wouldn't put anything past him. So always remember that guy's always got a plan Z. Everybody has A, B, and C. He's got a plan Z. So he's looking to the future for everything. And he knows that not everything's going to work out. It hasn't in his, nothing works out for everyone. I mean, it's not like you have a perfect scenario in every situation. So we're lucky enough to have somebody that looks so far into the future that he knows, okay, if this doesn't work out, then I got to go to this one, then I got to go to this one, and I got to run through the alphabet until I get it right. And I think we're going to see that with him. It's just time. I mean, it always takes time, and especially when you're building in pieces. And that's what he's done. And he's kept us in the AFC Championship or in a Super Bowl 4 straight years by doing the exact same thing. I mean, look, last year, he completely rebuilt the offensive line, got rid of a wide receiver, brought in other people that were new to the system, and we still made it to the AFC Championship game, which nobody else can say they did that.
And the Chiefs weren't in a spot to make the AFC Championship game when you're looking at the beginning of the season.
No, they were 3-4. So, I mean, they weren't in a great spot, and they didn't look like they were going to come out of it there for a little bit. So, but they did. And I give that a lot to Andy and the players. The players wanted to do better. Andy wanted them to do better. And he stepped in and made the changes that needed to be made offensively. And as far as defense, yeah, he did make some changes. I think a little bit of ego got in the way from week 17 on, and that, during the regular season I think it was week 16, 17, got in the way, and that hurt us a little bit. I mean, we went from 17th overall to 27th overall because of really a game. And that sucks. It really does, because we were doing really well. At one point, we were 6th in points allowed, ranked 10th overall there for a little bit. And then it just kind of, I don't know. It's hard to, you're not in the minds of those people, and you really don't know unless you're hearing something directly from the horse's mouth, and you're never going to get you're never going to get the truth out of them. I mean, you're never going to get exactly what they were thinking at that moment. It's rare that happens. Andy takes the blame for everything. Mahomes takes the blame for everything, but none of the other coaches really took the blame for anything. If you ever listened to the pressers, you never seen Bieniemy go in there and say, well, I made that mistake. You never heard that happen. That never happened during one of Bieniemy's press conferences. You really never hear it from Spags. Spags always has an excuse as to why he did it, but he doesn't say, that was my bad. I screwed up. So I don't know.
No. So yeah, it's just kind of just one of them things that kind of come about.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there's not much you can do about it. You just have to hope and pray for the best. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes this year, as far as performance on the field and coaching style as well. I don't know about you guys, but that's just how I feel.
I forgot to tell you guys, but tomorrow Tyreek Hill is going to be in Joplin doing that camp at my high school, so I'm going to go watch him for a little bit over there. But
he is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was funny because I was on a Snapchat and I was looking at my stories. He said, "See you in Joplin next week." I was like, "Really?" He's going to be at my high school, so
that's nice, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
He's charging $350 for a kid to go to his camp.
$350?
Yeah, I was wondering why he was coming back, but that gave me my answer.
Yeah,
$350. Oh my goodness! Whew.
Wow.
I know he did one in Olathe. That probably was the same amount or more per kid.
Well, he was supposed to do one out here. He was supposed to come out here last year, I believe it was, with all the wide receivers and do, kid, signings and practice with the kids and this and that and the other. He didn't end up coming. So a friend of my daughter's was pretty upset because he really wanted to meet Tyreek Hill. And I had Caleb and I had a Tyreek Hill signed mini helmet, and we ended up giving it to him for his birthday because he was so upset he didn't get a signature from him. So it was like he was pretty happy that he got that. But yeah, he I don't know. We ought to talk a little bit about that real quick, because that's still a topic of conversation with seems like everyone. Is this podcast that it comes out tomorrow? Am I not right?
Yeah, it comes out tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I cannot believe some of the stuff that's been said that he's just been saying is clickbait and just to get people to watch it. It's ridiculous how he backs his old franchise.
I feel like he's not bashing the Chiefs, and I think his press conference that Harold and Robert from Fox 4, he basically kind of said he think the team was happy with everything. I don't think he was trying to say they suppress the stats. I think that clip was used to stir controversy.
Yeah.
And it did just that.
But why even release that if you know it's not true? That's the thing. Like, why would you even do that? Because then people like me, we watch that before he, says it's not true, and we're like, what the heck? Like, Why would you do
Well, that
his
was
whole team
Rosenhaus
like
that
that?
brought that up. I mean, I don't think that was him. I think it was Rosenhaus that said that in that clip, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he still posted it. I mean, he sure had to say in that
Yeah.
going out.
Oh, I'm
So
sure he did. But he
it
wants
kind of
people to watch
it kind
it.
of rubbed me the wrong way.
It did too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It didn't. I think people might be taking it out of context, but I think he ultimately was just bringing in viewers. I mean, the guy he's marketing himself right now, and he's building a career beyond football. That's really what he's doing, and I think he's going to have a lot of success. He's not going to have nearly the success he had here, but he's going to have success in Miami. And then when it's all said and done, Caleb thinks the same thing, that he may come back here, play another year or two, and then retire as a Chief. I mean, it could be, or he could, on the flip side of that, he could play this last 3-year contract and say, you know what, I'm set for life. I don't want to play anymore.
One quote that was very interesting to me is he was basically kind of defending Tua, and he was saying, I had Matt Moore as my quarterback for game.
Matt Moores.
And I had he had like 175 yards, and he was like, Tua's 10 Matt Moores. And I'm like, okay, I mean, if he feels that confident, I mean, if he can have a 1,000-yard season down there, hey, props to him. He can do it.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting how he's used, though.
Have you seen the player comp on that with Matt Moore? They posted Matt Moore's best year in Miami versus Tua's, and they're almost identical.
Yeah.
And someone said 10 Matt Moores. Come on. I'm like, yeah, that's facts.
Yeah. I think Tua still needs some room to grow, but we'll see what happens. But Matt Moore, I think, was a great backup and really helped the Chiefs win that Super Bowl run.
He's not going to have any excuses after this year if Tua doesn't play well, and they end up having a losing season, or maybe just not even winning their division. It's going to be kind of crazy to see what goes on, because I know. Yeah, I don't know. They might end up making a change, but we'll see, I guess.
And it seems like Tyreek decided to chase some money. I mean, no problem too. I mean, there's no issue with that. I mean, I understand why he did that, but I mean, it looks like his numbers will possibly go down. So
yeah,
I think they have to, especially with Waddle being on the team. They're going to be spreading the ball around a little bit more. So
yeah, his numbers are definitely going to decline, and I think that's probably why he wanted so badly to play special teams. And that, I believe you may hear partly in that podcast, is that we wouldn't allow him to play special teams because it is dangerous and you'd take a lot of hits, and we didn't want our best wide receiver out there getting hit running footballs
exactly
back,
and I understand.
Yeah,
I understand why they don't want to play special teams. It makes sense.
Yeah. So Miami doesn't. That kind of gives you an idea of how Miami doesn't really give a shit about their players when you really think about it, because
I think Miami's in a mode to where they're trying to take this team to the next level, and they think Tyreek Hill can do that. And once that happens, they can probably bring in more free agents and sell the atmosphere. I think that's probably what they're trying to take it to the next level.
Yeah,
they're trying to do kind of what the Chiefs did with Alex Smith to help bring the team back into prominence. But they're bringing a guy like Tyreek Hill in and trying to bring in a different coach, do philosophy, just trying to turn everything around. Because if they can do that, the Dolphins might be able to make. The Dolphins might push the Bills. It's very possible.
I think they could have if they had kept Flores, but I got a feeling that's going to backfire on them. So that's just my opinion.
I kind of like the new coach they hired, but I agree that Flores is probably the better option. I think anyone from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree is going to have a little big success, just based off the fact that he was the run game coordinator, and they were amazing at that. Just getting guys into open space and all that, and creating plays for their players. And I think he will have success in Miami, but I think it's the same situation that the Chiefs were in, where you may have a quarterback that's not superstar level, and that ends up just costing you. They haven't even been to the playoffs with Tua, but I assume that when they do go to the playoffs, they're not going to be able to get over the hump, because Tua is a guy. Yeah, he has national championship experience, but he hasn't played on the biggest stage in the NFL, which is quite a bit different. And I don't think it's going to in the way that they think. And it's crazy to say that they could have had Justin Herbert and Tyreek Hill and all them, and then I would say, yeah, they have a real shot at winning. But
and that's sad
just with
too,
the Bills
I've
in
always been a Tua fan, and I always thought he could actually do something. But I think a lot of it had to do with coaching. Not as far as Flores is concerned, but he didn't have a good quarterbacks coach. He didn't have the.
Well, he didn't get support from the organization
He didn't
first
get
and
no.
foremost.
That's what I'm saying. He didn't get
Yeah.
any support from the organization. So, it Flores was his biggest advocate, and of course that's the reason why Flores is no longer there. But it's just, well, I can't say that. That's not the only reason why. But and I don't really want to get into the. I've already had my say on what I think of that owner and what he's proven to be true about himself.
Yeah, he wanted Deshaun Watson, if that says anything.
Well, he wanted a lot of things that he. It's funny how he wants the star black players, but he doesn't want a great black head coach. And he's made some questionable remarks in the past, and he's kind of proven himself now. I think he's, and I mean, I don't care what anybody thinks what I say. I think he's a racist piece of shit, and I think that's the reason why they're suffering and the reason why they have for a long time. That's just my opinion. But
Do you guys think the Dolphins, if the Chiefs have been playing the Dolphins in the next year or two, do you think Tyreek Hill will go off on the Chiefs, or do you think he's going to be kind of blanket coverage?
I don't think he's going to go off. I think we.
Well,
know
I'd
him
hope
too
we know
well.
how to play him.
Yeah, I hope not either. But I don't think he's going to get the numbers that he would get, with against other teams simply because of the fact that we know him so well. And they're going to be all over him. And I truly believe he's going to be more of a short yardage wide receiver than he is a long yardage wide receiver in Miami.
That can break the long bomb.
Yeah, because Tua's got the strength. He just doesn't have the accuracy with the strength.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he could put the ball down the field. He's just not very accurate while he's doing it. So
Gotcha.
I thought it was the other way around.
No, see, I watched a lot of film on him, and that was where he struggled a lot. Was where he, if he went downfield deep, he couldn't thread the ball similar like a Mahomes could. Double covered wide Tyreek Hill and drop the ball directly into his hands. He just couldn't do that. But I don't know. Maybe he's had a resurgence. Maybe he's changed a little. Maybe he's got more accuracy now. But the film I watched on him, that was a lot of his struggling was going deep and being accurate while he was doing it. Similar to how really Lamar Jackson was, the first couple of years he was in the league, is that he wasn't very accurate down deep, with deep passes unless somebody was wide open. And even then there was times that he was completely off. He was 5 yards to the left, 5 yards to the right, 20 yards over their head or short. So I think a lot of times your mind plays tricks on you. And I think that's part of Tua's problem is because he's not an arrogant guy. He's actually pretty humble. I think his mind just plays a lot of tricks on him. And when that happens, you're not as, you don't flow as well, I guess I should say. And I think that's part of Tua's issue. I think if he would get out of his own head, he'd be a lot better player. I feel like, and had the right coaching that would instill that into him. Because we see that with a lot of people, a lot of players have their own head, their own mindset kills the way they play the game. Even though they could be a phenomenal player, when it gets into their head, it hurts them. We've had it on our team. So it's just that sometimes that's coaching. Sometimes that's your own mind stability or, your personal stability, along with what you're hearing from the outside noise. If you let that get into you, and then your coaching not doing their job, it all plays a part in everything. And who knows, maybe Tyreek will help him become more accurate, become that more confident, have more confidence in himself to be able to play and not and drown out all that extra noise that he's been hearing for the last few years. We'll just see what happens. I mean, they spent a lot of money this year to build that team up. So I'd like to see him rival the Bills. I think, if any team,
They got the weapons to do it.
They do. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but I got a feeling the Bills are going to regress this year. And I think Cincinnati is going to regress this year. So
I believe that Cincinnati will regress, and I think there's a couple teams, and when one team regresses, another team has to do better. A couple teams I think are going to do better. I think it's obvious that the Chargers are probably going to be better this year than they were last year. I think you're right that the Bills may start off a little slow. I think the Bengals are definitely going to regress from last year, even pre Super Bowl run. I mean, they didn't have the best record. They lost to a lot of bad teams like the Jets and all that. But then they went on the run and they went to the Super Bowl because they got hot at the right time. But I think they'll take it back a notch to where they were last year. And to your point, I think the Dolphins will rival the Bills a little bit more than people think. I still think the Bills are going to come out on top in that division. And that's not to say that the Dolphins couldn't earn a wild card spot, but just with how loaded the AFC is, with the Broncos now being good, the Chargers now being good, the Chiefs are in the same division. How many wild card spots are there going to be left? After the end of this year, because you're looking at, well, whoever doesn't win the AFC West, that's definitely going to be one wild card, and the third place AFC West team may be the other wild card. So it's just going to be interesting to see what record they can put up. I know the AFC West has a pretty hard schedule this year, so if they're able to beat out some teams, and we'll see. But I think if they don't make the playoffs, it's going to be a really bad look for Tua, plus their whole team and the head coach, just from what's all happened this offseason.
Yeah, the owner is going to be the one that's going to get the brunt of the punishment on that one, because I think he started off the downfall of every time a team. It's funny when you look at how the Chiefs have slowly rebuilt their team over the last 4 years. They've still been able to maintain their status and either win the AFC or go to the Super Bowl. And a lot of teams, when they do what Miami does, which most teams do, they just do a fire sale. Miami's done it like 3 times in the last 10 years. But they do a fire sale, they get rid of everybody, they're dead last. Then they get to a point where they're just starting to do well, like they did with Flores, a 10-win season, 9-win season. Oh, you're fired. And then they do it again. And when you go on those, if you don't give a coach enough time to acclimate and have the players acclimate to him, you're never going to get anywhere. It's just that simple. And these teams like Miami that fire their head coaches, whether it be in the middle of the season or they don't give them enough time, a new head coach with a new team needs 5 years. It just is what it is. And you're not going to get that. John Gruden had 4 years with the Raiders, and he wasn't a new head coach. I mean, he was a Super Bowl winning head coach. So it's horrible to watch some of these guys fail because of they're set up to fail. And I feel like Flores was set up to fail, in my opinion. It's just me, but I don't know, man. Sometimes karma's a bitch and it'll come back and bite you in the ass. And I think that might end up happening to Miami, but let's see. We'll see what happens. Any other news that's going on out in the NFL that we need to discuss?
Yes, just a really go ahead, Keaton.
I didn't really talk about possibly the comments by Orlando Brown, possibly his signing the extension. It sounded like that, he was going to use his leverage of the fact that the Chiefs are not going to go into the season with a backup left tackle or left tackle against them. I just want to talk maybe a little bit just about, when do you think this contract will be signed? How much do you think it'll be? Do you really think he'll maybe get the top money in the NFL, or you think that was just, more of a public outcry of things that they think they're going to happen that are going to happen?
What do you think, Caleb?
I think Brown's probably going to get some money. I think they're going to have to really try to put a bonus structure in their form in order for it to not count against the cap. And maybe some of that money, the $14 million Beach is going to have, will go towards Orlando Brown. But I feel like you can't give a large amount of that money to him. You have to spread it around. I think he could possibly be considered the highest paid left tackle, but I feel like the Chiefs will be able to work out a deal where it's team friendly and there'll be a lot of bonus structure involved. Easy stuff that I think he can possibly attain, where Clark Hunt is cutting the check rather than the Chiefs cap space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that he, in terms of age and the highest paid right now, which is Trent Williams, I would say he definitely deserves to be the highest paid if you're looking at those two players, just simply because of age and he's not injury prone. I mean, Trent Williams, the year prior to us almost signing him, was out a lot because of injury. So does he deserve it because of the market? Yeah. Because of his play? Yeah. I mean, he does. And he's right. The Chiefs aren't going to go in, blindly with the backup left tackle unless for some reason that backup just turned out to be phenomenal. But it, like you had said, Caleb, when we talked about on the show last week, it's going to have to be some type of a team-friendly deal, whether it be bonus structured that he can obtain easily or something of that nature that keeps him here. Now, as far as seeing that puts you in a dilemma because you need Orlando Brown. There's nobody else out there that can really replace him that we have. But then you also need help on the defensive line. So where do you go? You got 14 million. Do you drop it on Orlando Brown or do you go out and sign one of these guys that are going to want $7 to $10 million a year on a 1-year rental? Which way do you go with that? Do you?
Well, I thought that it could possibly even open up more cap space by signing him long term. I thought that was the conversation that maybe signing Brown to a longer deal could open up, $5 to $10 million in cap space.
Well, I think it would be an extension, and that's pretty much over with because he was only on a 1-year deal with us, and now he's no longer. He's actually a free agent. If he was still actually a Chief per se, then yeah, you can extend him and drag the money out. But right now, he's not really a Chief. That ended in March, so he's not really. He's not signed by anyone.
He did a franchise tag.
You can go that route. You could go that route, but the problem is with that, if you tag him, somebody else is going to come in and snag him in a minute for what he wants.
So well, we did tag him, I thought.
We did, but I'm saying he's going to get snagged by somebody. So I think his tag was
like 15 million.
It's like around 18 million,
18
but
million,
I don't think another team can snag him until next year.
No, they can get him this year if they wanted. I think I have to look at the rules, but
I don't think so. I think franchise tag locks him up for 1 year for. I think it's a percentage of the highest paid in the NFL per position. So if you're to like franchise tag a quarterback, it'd be somewhere between 35 to 45 million.
And somebody couldn't come in and match or beat that, and then he could walk.
Yeah, no, I think if it's a franchise tag, you're with the team for a year, no matter what. And then the next year you can renegotiate, or you can just, decide to not play on the tag, which is something that could happen if.
Well, I know they could tag him up to 2
years,
years, though. If I'm not mistaken, they could tag him up to 2 years.
Well, yeah, you can if next year if they wanted to tag him again, they could do that, which they probably wouldn't because players hate playing on a tag. But
yeah,
pretty much he can't be touched by another team, but he can decide not to play under it and then lose money, like we saw with Le'Veon Bell or
that's true.
Some other guys.
That's true. I know it used to be at one time, and I guess I haven't kept on the rules, but I know at one point if somebody franchise tagged you and another team came in and they offered more during a certain time period, you were able to take that contract, or that team that you were franchised with had to match it or beat it. And I don't know if that's still the rule or not, but I guess apparently it's not. I mean, maybe I've lost. Maybe they changed it, but that used to be how it was at one time.
That would be crazy because if that was true, then another team probably would have already offered him a little bit more than 18 million a year.
Yeah, so they must have changed that now. So, and again, that's my bad for not even keeping up with that rule. But
no, that's cool.
Yeah,
it's hard to remember all these rule changes.
Yeah, pretty insane how they change them, and there's more implemented now, and they're gonna, from what I understand, they're implementing rules for the referees. They're gonna change some more rules within the league as far as on top of the whole stupid coin flip first, touchdown shit and everything else in the playoffs. All that's changing. They're making a lot of rule changes. And there's going to be a lot of new refs next year, from what I understand.
Do refs get press conferences after the game in front of reporters?
That'd be nice.
They're not going to do that because that should be one of the rules.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, they used to do that. They would catch the ref before he ran off the field, and they would ask him why he made that call. Well, that's what and a lot of them used to get pissed. And
these need to be live if they do them.
Yeah, they would do it, when they're running off the field, and a lot of them would get pissed off and just say, well, that's what I seen. See ya. And it would keep walking. Yeah. Some of them didn't answer. But
they probably got something in there to where in a contracts with a team saying you can't do that, or media.
Well, shit. I mean,
because
the
they
coach
really
can't-
protect officials now,
Yeah, a coach.
even
can't-
if it's a
can't even
bad
say-
call that
Yeah,
everyone has seen.
exactly. A coach can't even say anything without getting fined. So if a coach says something in a press conference about a questionable call, they get fined. That's why you heard Andy say 3 times last year, "I don't want to be fined," because if he says anything negative about it, it's a fine. Even the players get fined for it. I mean, Travis Kelce got fined for it. So,
Mhm.
and he had
Yeah,
every
it's
right to say what he
ridiculous.
said. So,
Yeah, especially I think we're gonna see. I mean, obviously in the future, I think you're gonna see a switch to more of a computerized, automatic penalty system where it's a penalty on the field and they can look at it in New York and use all their camera angles to decide the correct call. Because I think especially baseball is a good example of this. I don't know why there's not already electronic umpires, because the strike zone has been a big question mark. I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
kind of the same for football
Mhm.
because, some of these calls that they look at in New York, they have all the camera angles. They're like, well, we can tell you what the call is. It's obvious that, this happened, but it was called differently on the field. Well,
Mhm.
although the ref on the field may have a better angle, the guys in the booth have all the angles and they see
Mhm.
everything. So I
Yeah.
think that's what you're going to see in the future, but it is annoying for right now being a fan, seeing some of these games
Oh yeah.
controlled, like like the Edelman touch the ball kind of thing.
or
Mhm.
the
All
Cincinnati
this stuff
game in week
happening. It
17
just
last
controls
week.
the outcome of games. It's crazy.
Yeah. Cincinnati's week 17 game was a great example of that. The Saints game was a great example of that in 19. Or no, 8 was that 18?
I don't remember but I know you're talking about. The guy
18
tackled him
and
before he even caught
It
the
was the
ball.
same year that we lost to the Patriots when we shouldn't
Mhm.
have.
Yeah.
It's like we've said before. You can't you're not going to find somebody that's not a fan. I mean, it's virtually impossible to find somebody that's completely unbiased towards a team. And Cincinnati proved that with Jerome Boger's crew, and that guy's no longer a ref. He got suspended. And that, weirdly enough, it didn't happen until after the Raiders game, but he got caught doing it during that game as well. New York had their opportunity in week 17 to step in, and they didn't step in one single time.
Yeah.
Not once during that entire game did they step in. And we've already talked about this on the show, but I blew a head gasket and called my buddy up there, and he actually said, "I was waiting for this call." And I said, "What the F were you guys doing? I mean, what were you thinking about? And why, you got all these people that, can stop the game in an instant, going frame by frame, and you don't have one New York even glimpse." It just made no sense to me.
Mhm.
But he and that's when he told me that they had substitute refs in for the Chiefs and the Cowboys game. And I said, so the two teams that you should have been looking at the most, you looked at the least. And you had other teams that were getting New York calls all day long. But the two teams that had they had the substitute refs, or the most substitute refs, and working with other crews that they're not used to working with. You guys didn't call one time, and the Cowboys went through the same thing that during that time, week 17, they went through the same thing. Substitute refs, bad calls. It was a horrid time for two football teams for sure. And I'm sure there was others, but those were the ones that stood out the most, were the questionable calls then.
Mhm.
And it's always great when you hear somebody that's retired step up and say, "God dang, what the hell was that?" I mean, Romo's, kind of stepped on his tongue a couple of times when it comes to the calls, and they've made him tone it down a little bit. But because there at the beginning, he was going after the refs pretty good, and even last year, he went after the refs a couple of times, and I guess they've told him he had to tone it down as far as going after the refs. But they're way too protected. They need to be fined, and we've been saying this for years, Caleb and I, that I think they need to do pressers. And if they're going to find a player for something, if the ref does it wrong, he needs to be fined, because they don't make pennies. They get paid very well to do what they do. So, and they don't take near the punishment other than a little bit of flack, is mainly what they get. They have to deal with the flack. They don't get hit. They don't get beat up. They don't get pounded. They get to have 25, 30-year careers and get paid very well to do it. So I don't know. It's just strange, especially in playoff and Super Bowls. They even get more money. So it's they have to make those changes. They have to really, if they're going to make the game easier on the players, and like Caleb has said, you can't play defense anymore, which is true, then you have to change the rules for the refs as well. You have to make it, they have to call the right calls. If they don't, then somebody else that's watching has to make sure that they called the right calls. And far too many times last year we had heard that what's his name, Mike, the retired referee that's always on the primetime games, when they go to him and ask him what he thought, far too many times did he say that was a bad call, or that was a questionable call, or it shouldn't have been called, the flag should have never left their pocket. You hear that so many times from a guy that spent 30 years in the NFL as not only a head coach but then also worked in New York, or a head ref, but also worked in New York with the refs. It's telling you something. So those
For sure.
there's got to be some changes. Just is what it is. But I don't know. We're gonna see what we're gonna do. It's if they franchise tagged him and they got the money to do what they want to do. I don't know if they're going to try to extend him now, or if they'll wait, halfway through the season, or maybe into the end of the season before they extend him. Maybe the market will change for that position, which it usually doesn't for that position. That's the one consistent market that's always pretty high, is that, offensive line. And, it's wide receivers markets change, corners change, running backs have changed a lot over the past, 7 years, other than Zeke. But that's a position that usually, if it does anything, it goes up instead of down. So we'll just have to see what happens, and see how his performance is this year. If it's he's going to play on a tag, he's either going to be pissed off and play like crap, or he's going to be the best he can be so he can get the fattest contract of anybody next year.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see what happens. But
For sure.
yep. With that being said, what else you guys got?
That was all I had to talk about.
Yeah, I think same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
Okay.
Pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, I think so too. With all the chatter out there and all the crappy articles and the clickbait stuff, the one thing you won't get from us is clickbait. You're going to get true, factual articles. So make sure you follow chiefsfocus.com and follow the podcast, Chiefs Focus First and 10. Check out and make sure you follow Keaton on Twitter and Instagram. Keaton, give out your handles real quick.
Yeah, my Twitter is Keaton the Kicker, and then my Instagram is just Keaton Huff with 3 F's. So I appreciate a follow of you guys. I do a lot of articles and stuff like that. So
Yes.
if you want to drop a follow, I can keep releasing content for you guys, so you guys can get it straight from me.
Definitely. And he's been doing some great articles as well. And we're also on Newsbreak, and a few other media outlets that we're signed up with, news and media outlets that have brought us on. And so if you can't find our articles, if you got Newsbreak on your phone, turn your notifications on for Chiefs Focus, and you'll see an article there every day. And with that being said, we will talk to you guys next week. Hopefully there'll be some news, some more stuff to talk about, because this is the lull of the season where it's just that in between spot and you really don't have a whole lot to say. But we try to keep as much content as we can coming to you guys. So with that being said, we will talk to you guys next week, and I hope everybody has a great weekend.
See you next time, guys.
Thank you.
Peace out.